Like so many others, who you are is largely a result of your past. We have so many positive and not so positive experiences that we start to doubt ourselves and our place in this world. Let the healing process start now. Welcome to Shift Happens with Karin Weiri. When you start to focus on healing from the inside out, you'll learn so much more about your own health, your well-being, and your state of mind. Once you've started on that, the rest gets a little bit easier every day. Now, here is your host, Karin Weiri.
Hello and welcome to Shift Happens. I am your host, Karin Weiri, licensed marriage and family therapist and breakthrough life coach. Today, well, every week we make shift happen, but today is a topic that I am so super passionate about. And because of that, we are dedicating the whole hour without any other commercials or messages breaking this up, because this is the true epidemic. We are talking about our future, our kids who are endangered and put in very precarious places and situations, and what can we do about it? This topic today is about human trafficking, and it is really an epidemic. It is so far beyond what a lot of people actually realize, because it is not covered in mainstream media, sadly, and it is many a times very much ignored and downplayed, and they're not policies set in place to really protect our children. And so this is actually the fourth show that I've had on this particular topic. And if this is something that you also are passionate about and you want to share and get this information out, let me tell you the other dates that you can scroll back in the episodes of Shift Happens to find. The first episode that we did was back in December 17th, 2019 with Jan Edwards, and she works on prevention and going into the schools and working with parents so that we can put the power in kids and parents' hands and know what to look for and what to do so we can try to prevent as much as possible. And back in December 1st, 2020, we had today's guest, Andi Buerger, on for the first time. Yay. And then on January 26th of this year, 2021, we had attorney Ashley Barlow John. Oh God, I've just butchered her name, but she works also to, to help people who are in human trafficking, help them get out, and all the legalities that they have to go through. So today, let me introduce our returning guest, Andi Buerger. She is also an attorney. She is co-founder of Voices Against Trafficking, which brings together national and international partners dedicated to eradicating the business of profiting in human lives. Andi is also co-founder of Beulah's Place in Redmond, Oregon, a shelter for homeless teens whose mission is to provide victims and at-risk kids help, healing, and most of all, hope in a non-judgmental environment. Andi is herself a survivor of many years of childhood abuse, and she is a lifelong advocate for human rights. She is also the author of A Fragile Thread of Hope, One Survivor's Quest to Rescue. And she's a sought-after international speaker and frequent guest on radio and television programs regarding the issue of human trafficking. And this month happens to be Child Abuse Awareness Month. So welcome, Andi. Thank you so much for coming back and sharing your wealth of knowledge in this area.
Oh, it's my honor, Karin. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for being a frontline advocate for our children in this country and all over. We need more media people and more folks like you doing that. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's, to me, it's mind-blowing how you can look at an innocent little child, these beautiful little precious faces, little souls, and do the horrendous things that are done to them. But it happens, and it is our responsibility to protect them. And the other part is that happens, as kids have been treated this way. And I have in the work that I've done over many decades, I've worked with kids who have been in and out of foster care. I've worked with adults who, survived that system. I have worked with social workers who work in the system who were traumatized themselves by working the system, because the system itself is so horrendous. It does not, there are cases where, they try to do their best, but, with the system the way it is, but the system is so horrendous, it just needs to be broken down and rebuilt in a way. So when the workers themselves are getting traumatized by the work that they're doing, it's bad.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And it makes sense, because when you hear, even when my writer, Kay, and I wrote that book and got it out there, the 4 stories that we shared, they were traumatizing when I first heard them. And I rescued those kids. It just, I can't imagine frontline workers like you just mentioned in mental health care and counseling and other ways, emergency rooms, what they go through when they hear and see the effect of child abuse, of sexual abuse, of all of those things that go into dehumanizing a human being. And as you said, a little child, we know in this country alone, Karin, that 80% of all the child deaths from child abuse are usually 5 years and younger, and 80%, are 5 years and younger. That's horrible. Yeah. We are literally beating our children to death.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that this level of abuse, so many obviously don't survive it. And then there's the other piece, which I brought up last time you were on here. These kids then grow up, when they do survive childhood, as you did yourself.
Yes.
Then, now this is not a whole human being. This is someone who's been dehumanized, just torn apart day in and day out. And guess what usually happens? They step into abusive relationships. They self-medicate with alcohol and drugs. They go and work in my most worst term, gentlemen's clubs. I'm sorry, there are no gentlemen that goes to those things, places.
Absolutely.
In my opinion, when you go and frequent those places, you are contributing to human trafficking. Just because they're adults now, they are vulnerable, human beings who they just don't know any better.
Absolutely. One of the girls we rescued, about 4 or 5 years ago, she was just 18, and all she thought she was worth was being used by men, because she would get money or dinners or a place to sleep for the night. And so anything they wanted, she would offer, because that's what she was trained to do. But even in smaller towns or smaller regions, we had a district attorney that actually believes that as soon as a girl's 18, if she is a prostitute, she chose that. Absolutely no regard for how she got there, why she might be doing that, or if she's actually being trafficked, and just happens to be in a prostitution ring. So you're right. It's a miracle that I did not go that path. I was sexually and physically and emotionally, mentally abused from 6 months forward until I was 17, and I was trafficked by family members. And familial trafficking, as you are aware, is harder to catch because the predators live with you. And they have a bloodline that covers them if you even try to talk to anyone. And that's the same with child abusers. They are covered, especially if they're family members. And one of the things I try to encourage people is not just if you see something, say something, but if you are a family member, stand up for that child. Don't be, oh, well, I don't want to embarrass anyone, or, what if I'm wrong? If anyone would have stepped in, I would not have the physical issues I have today from all of the abuse and all of the stuff that happened to me for those 17 years of my life.
And one of the things I think a lot of people don't really quite understand the depth and breadth of is how, we hear it, but it may seem kind of cliche like, but those are formative years. And this is the foundation of who you are. And while we can go in and heal that, the longer it takes place, if that's all you ever known, I mean, in your case, you were 6 months old, you had you had no chance, and yet here you are, standing up and speaking up, international speaker, and providing safety and hope for survivors.
Well, you're absolutely right. I went through all of my elementary school years, all of my high school years feeling like yesterday's garbage. Like I was, if the people who raised me didn't love me, how could anybody else love me? And, as you mentioned, broken relationships. So I had a very abusive first marriage. And thankfully now I'm blessed with an amazing husband and an amazing relationship. And but it was a hard road because I didn't know anything. I didn't have any examples of how to be treated or how to treat other people. The only thing I knew was a very primal, if I live, I win, and if I die, they win. And so even though I did try to take my life a few times, in my life, God interceded. In other people's lives, it's something else. But I could have very easily become part of a different kind of sex trafficking ring, or gone to alcoholism, or gone into drug use, or simply just been used until I couldn't be used anymore. That would have been the normal course for someone who survived or who went through what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember the person that stands out in my memory that I worked with that had the worst effects. You probably had been through the worst abuse that I've worked with anybody. She herself felt like a non-human. This is what she was saying. It was in her entire demeanor. She could not hold eye contact. It took years before she could just look up and have eye contact with me for 5 seconds. And, and so exactly that. And to go around life, it's really hard to even imagine what it's like when you yourself have been fortunate enough to grow up being loved. Yeah.
Yes, and to that point, when someone who does survive abuse or manages to function, as you know, there's higher levels of functioning, lower levels, in between levels, but if they are functioning, that whole idea of love or security or relationship, when normal happens, it's a weird experience. I can tell you, from my experience, when somebody actually treats you kindly, or you marry someone who truly loves you for who you are, and you're like, do I trust this? What do I do with it? What is normal to other people? Because I certainly didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so do you still feel that kind of strangeness in being loved now at this point in your life, or are you starting
No.
to? No. Okay.
No, I feel I do truly know genuine love, and I do know that when somebody expresses that to me, I sense the reality of it, if it's genuine or if it's just, kind of surface or whatever. But it took years. I'm almost 6 decades into this life. And, it's really been the last 10 years that I got it, right? That I experienced it. And it wasn't for lack of people trying to love me. I just always had that little bit of, yeah, but, what if, or if I disappoint them, or I'm not perfect, or I don't buy them something, or whatever it was. It took a long time to really get my identity and find my worth. And I had pieces of it, but it just wasn't a natural part of my life until maybe about 9 years into my marriage with my husband, Ed. And then it was like, okay, all right, I can actually be happy, and this person isn't going anywhere, and he loves me with all his heart, that kind of stuff. But even in friendships with other women or men, it was one of those things that I really had to work at because I didn't have that much experience with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And your whole nervous system is set up to, it's totally askew, because our nervous system is set up so that it's supposed to go into fight or flight when we need it. And then it's supposed to come back down to normal levels. But in growing up how you were, it was just totally jacked up and always up there because you were always in danger.
Absolutely, always, absolutely. And even when I left, you're mentally still imprisoned by all the self-talk and the negativity and the PTSD, which really, in truth, this last year was the first time I ever even admitted that or brought that up to my medical doctor, because we were discussing different things. And for me, the whole mask issue it is a problem because I have seizure issues and things like that. So we were talking about, oh, and by the way, having people try to choke you to death a number of times, that doesn't help either, with the PTSD stuff. There's a lot of triggers with people being, you can't identify them. It's hard to tell what somebody is communicating to you when they have glasses and hats and masks and things. So imagine a child, trying to report or trying to tell somebody, that they've been hurt. What do they say right now? But I was so hurt and beaten down and traumatized and pounded on that I couldn't even stand the touch of somebody if they hugged me. I freaked out inside, and it took a lot of therapy and a lot of years to get over that. That's how severe it was for me. Yeah. But I never let anyone know. I had that game face on because that's what you do to survive.
Mm. Yeah, that is that piece of there's a turmoil going on the inside, but other people probably can't see it.
Right. And so you become the overachiever, the pleaser. There were times when I think I was between college and law school, and I was just so lonely. And I tried to be active. I was active in church. I was active in social things. I tried to be active with people, but Los Angeles was a big town, which is where I grew up, and Orange County areas. And so, but I was so lonely, I would actually give a gift to friends of friends who were getting married or having babies, just so I could be part of that for a short period of time, or somebody would talk to me. That's how desperate it was, Karin. And I know that loneliness drives people maybe who don't have the strength or courage yet, to keep walking forward or living forward, to drugs, to alcohol, to multiple relationships, to a lot of sexual liaisons, because they're looking for that fill. Mm-hmm. They're looking for something to fill that huge black hole of theirs. Mm-hmm. And so thankfully, got out of that cycle, but that's how deep it can go. So imagine now you have a child or a young teen, and somebody says, hey, how would you like to go out for a Coke, or I'd love for you to come to this party, right? And you're going to meet a lot of great friends, and because they can smell the vulnerability in this young person. They can tell that maybe they're neglected or they're abused, or they simply don't have any parental intercession or anyone really watching them. And so, like one of my girls that we rescued, she was introduced to a 30-year-old woman. She was 17, and this woman buddied up to her, took her to lunch, bought her some little presents, created that trust. And a few months down the road, in that particular case, hey, come meet some of my friends. They're going to be at the hotel down the road. Would really like you to meet them. And it didn't work out quite that way for that girl. She ended up being used and being sold and being controlled by that, saying, you're the one that's going to go to jail because no one will believe you. Mm. So that's how easily it can happen with someone who's traumatized from the abuse, or they simply are lost in life as a young person because they don't have anyone to be their hero or to back them up.
Yeah. And this is where as a parent, being strong is so important, that kids feel that safety, that I have backup. If there's something I don't like, I can go there. So just, so how does that actually work, with regards to the 30-year-old woman and, was telling the 17-year-old, I have these friends, and then she was sold. So how does a sale of a human being actually take place? Like, look, practically.
Well, in that particular case, I wasn't there firsthand, but from her story, which is in my book, it doesn't go into a lot of detail about that. But basically, the girl felt indebted to this woman because she had been nice to her. And I get that, because anyone who's nice to someone who's been abused or hurt in such a way, and for me, I think sexual violation is the most intimate kind of abuse and torture, because it's just so intimate. But all abuse is bad: mental, emotional, physical, sexual, all of that's bad. But with this particular woman, the girl felt indebted because she had been nice to her and had taken her to lunch. She didn't want to lose that. She wanted to please her. Okay. So at that point, she never got any of the money, but she was caught. She was trapped because she didn't have anyone to reach out to. And it wasn't until just after her 18th birthday that she reached out to us, that she had heard about us, and we were able to help her. But at that point, the damage is well done.
Yeah.
So that's one example. And then another one is with college kids. An ex-Navy SEAL friend of mine years ago said, Andi, the traffickers are smart. They're hiring. They are paying college students to target other young people and invite them into a trust relationship, and then, take them to one of those parties or take them someplace where they will have no way to escape and become part of a trafficking ring. So at that time, the rate was about $1,500 for a young man to target one girl and get her secluded or isolated enough where she trusted him, and then he would take her to wherever the house or the place was where the trafficking ring, would scoop her up. And then the gangs, are doing the same thing. People need to realize that when gangs push drugs, right, you have to get the materials, the ingredients, you have to make it, you have to package it, you have to distribute it. There's a lot of different ways to get caught. But if you're a gang member, and let's say you're a male gang member, and you invite your girlfriend over to a little party with your friends, and you sell her 10, 20 times that night, which is not unusual, and you get paid for that, who is she going to tell the next morning if she survives? Right? You escape. There's no way she's going to go home and say, hey, guess what happened to me? Right? So the gang person gets the money, and there's no chance of them really getting caught unless the girl has the courage to report. And if she does have the courage, most likely, Karin, she will not be believed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things that is that whole piece of consent or not consent, so you might have consented to one part, to hug or kiss or whatever kind of thing, but then when it goes further, and then where is that distinction? And it's that gray area, like you said, is so much easier with human trafficking to, and plus you don't have to have more, you have that same person you just sell over and over and over again. So it's very profitable.
Yes, absolutely. And so the predators, we have a huge situation, and not to be political, but just the sale right now of children, the going rate is $3,200, at the border. And so that's just horrific. But in everyday life, in every town, we know that every 40 seconds, a child 18 and under is abducted. We know that Donald Washington from the U.S. Marshal Service, and the Marshal Service has been doing a great job finding missing kids. But that is an astounding statistic when you think about it. Every 40 seconds. Wow. I'm not a math major, so I can't tell you how many kids will go missing in our hour together, but it's a lot.
More than 60.
Yeah. So the whole point of one of the points, I should say, of my message is, look, if you're listening and watching this, you need to know that it happens. And the predators don't look like the people you see in the movies. I mean, some of them, yes, they are from different countries, but the basic predator looks like your dentist or the school teacher or the coach. And we know from recent scandals in universities like USC, the gynecologist, over 700 females were violated. And the district attorney did nothing to help those girls. So we have a very, very broken system, as you mentioned earlier. And we have Michigan and Pennsylvania over and over. We see universities and colleges that are getting lawsuits against them. But in regular schools, do you really know who your child is with? Has the elementary school principal been vetted? Have the coaches been vetted? Has the kitchen staff been vetted? If you have a tutor or you take your kids to music lessons, do you really know who you're leaving your kids with? And it's not that you have to be a police state in your home. It's that you have to be integrated into your kids' lives. And whether you're working as a single parent or there's two parents or there's guardians, it does take time, but your child should be worth that investment.
Yeah. And it's challenging because once you get to school and especially high school, the staff is, enormous. The schools are enormous. And then again, what I also, I can't remember if it was you or Jen Edwards or all of you that were talking about how they also get kids to, to lure kids into, it becomes kid on kid, luring them into the rings. So
yes, absolutely, peer to peer, and we saw this even with Epstein and Maxwell in the national cases that a lot of times predators will have a male and female, because when you think about it, if you're a young woman, let's say you're anywhere from 15, 16 years old to 21, and you see a woman that looks like Ghislaine Maxwell, and she's dressed nice, and she's got expensive shoes, and she looks successful, and she speaks well, and she's got nice teeth and good makeup and all that, right? A lot of aspiring young women would want to be like her, okay, without really knowing any background. And so females are being used as well as males to expand the trafficking marketplace, which globally is over $160 billion. In the US, it's about 40 billion or more. So we're talking a lot of money. And of that global number, 95 billion is all sex trafficking. The rest is labor and other things.
Yeah. And that's the piece also that a lot of people think, oh, that happens in Thailand and over in the East. But no, yeah, it and people are being imported to the US, right? And is there a certain way back and forth that the trafficking happens more so than another? Like,
Well, before January, before this year, usually your ports, where there are waterways like, Portland, Oregon, or, the Gulf, things like that, New York, anywhere where literally containers of people or passage by water can happen. Obviously, the airways, although one of our charter members in Voices Against Trafficking, Nancy Rivard, and airline ambassadors, are doing a stellar job of training all personnel on airlines about how to spot traffickers or victims, and what looks suspicious. So they're doing a great job with at airlines, obviously, and then trucking, not just trucking as in commercial truckers, but we had a case not too long ago where a gentleman had a young woman. She was probably just 20 and was driving a moving van and stopped at a homeless shelter for the night. And she tried to tell the staff that she didn't want to go with him and that she was being hurt. But unfortunately, the predator, the male, was very quick, and he kind of guessed what was going on in the kitchen, and he grabbed her and left. So, it's a lot about awareness, education, training. And unfortunately, in that particular instance, it was a first-time event. And so, the staff obviously didn't know. They wanted to help, but they didn't know how. And so we're trying to get the word out about how to help. Go to your local law enforcement, find out what you can report, what to look for, really find out, are the kids missing because they're just teenagers who are rebellious? Maybe a few, but probably not most of them. That's what I can say with authority.
Yeah. And when you were talking about the border, talk a little bit about what's going on. I don't really watch the news, but I've seen, a couple of pictures of little kids just being dumped, kind of dropped off the wall there, and then there they are.
Exactly. And there are thousands of them every single day coming across. And why now? Why all of a sudden in the last 2 or 3 months, we have this deluge of unaccompanied children? Now, it's one thing to say, oh, they have family in the States, but if that's true, why isn't the family there waiting for them? Why isn't the family there to pick them up? And who's monitoring the adults that are supposedly with these children? Do we really know that they're the family? I mean, 80% of the women coming across the border right now, I apologize for the brutal part of this, but they're called raping trees. They are violated. And so if they survive and they come over, they're not necessarily attached to kids. A lot of times the predators will force adults and children to be together to get over, but now they're just throwing kids over the line, so to speak, and they're being sold for $3,200, $3,700. That was the last number I have from my friends who are on the border doing what I do there, trying to pick up as many kids as possible and shelter them and protect them. Because what do you do with 7,000 children suddenly? Where do you put them? The conditions that they're experiencing are no better than an animal in a cage.
Yeah. It's just mind blowing. Yeah.
But there's hope. There is
Yes.
hope. Like the people working on the border to help these kids the best they can. There's way too many, and we need our legislators. Why aren't more legislators upset about this? Why aren't they making more visits? And of course, obviously the administration. Why has no one gone down there? And why are they not allowing, more photography and more videos of what's happening down there? And I think the entire nation would be stunned if they saw what was going on. Hearing it, seeing clips on general media is one thing, but to really know, how many kids are coming over and they have nothing. What do you do with these young people? Let's say it's a teenager. Where are they going to find work? Where are they going to get their health needs? Have they been tested, for COVID? But the hope is we create the awareness. We ask people, look, during this time right now, make that call to the mayor, to the DAs, to the local law enforcement. And if you don't get anything there in your area, make the calls to your representatives. Whoever you voted for, that person is accountable to you. They're not always held to accountability, but they need to account for what is their position on child abuse? What is their position on penalties for people caught abusing their children? Or distributing videos of beating children, which has happened, in the past couple of years. For some reason, some people find that entertaining. And so, what are the penalties and why are we not enforcing them? Where are the other legislators from all 50 states on this border issue? So if we don't press in and demand human rights for every human, including the children, especially the children, the future of all countries, then we are going to continue to have the situation we have. We're going to lose more children to death, and we're going to have more walking wounded, just like I have been my whole life. The difference is I found ways to heal and get counseling and to make different choices, but I had to do all of that myself. There wasn't anyone that helped me with it. And so my goal is, if we all stand up together, united, Karin, then we can do more. And that's what Voices Against Trafficking is about. Any voice can be a part of the solution. And again, if we see something, we need to say something. And we do need to be more involved. We do need to monitor the internet and what our kids and teens and college students are looking at. Check the histories. We do need to understand not every person on the internet is a good person.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm just reading over some of the information, the statistics that you sent me. And it talks about how studies indicate significant undercounting of child maltreatment fatalities by some state agencies by 50% or more. Yeah. Yeah. And I know,
50%.
yeah. And one of the social workers that I have been working with this year was telling me how the reports have gone up 2.5 times, or cases have gone up 2.5 times during this whole situation we've had. And the other part that's really scary is with regards to the mask on several things. One, how, like you said, it's triggering for a lot of people. It's hard to breathe. It literally reduces our oxygen. I have a nurse neighbor who was, she measured her oxygen, on that while she was wearing
Right.
a mask. And then, but also then I came across an article which really jogged my brain, was because, how brains are set to look at faces and really zoom in, and this is how they learn how to read people and this, that, and the other. And so if all these babies, they're just seeing eyes, it's a whole kind of sensitive period that is part of their development that's being really damaged. Their
Absolutely, you're right on. And again, the unchecked mandates or lockdowns or whatever we want to call it, at this point, that increase is so exponential. It's hard to get the exact number because kids are not reporting. They don't know who's on the other end of the internet, but they're less likely to report to a teacher if they're actually doing online schooling, or to anyone else. They're trapped in the familial cycle, or they're trapped in a babysitter cycle, maybe, wherever they are while the parents are working. So they don't really have the way to escape or to run down the hallway of a school and tell somebody, they're being hurt. It's horrific. And I am just really surprised there isn't more outrage over this, because the numbers are going to hurt those kids for the rest of their lives and families, because as you know, the trauma, the body memories, all of that will follow them, and it will go to the functionality of future generations. So stepping up now, saying, hey, we want our community to do more about this issue, whether you have 10 people in your neighborhood, or, 100 people in your community, or you have thousands, or millions, in your community. Everyone needs to play a part in this. You cannot have victims without predators. And before all of this happened, we knew that 1 to 2 girls out of every 4 would be sexually abused minimally. And it was about 1 out of every 6 boys. Now the boys, have creeped up to 2 or 3, and the girls are way more than 50%.
Wow.
So we need to stop this, and we need to stop it now. And there are a lot of solutions, like we talked about, check the internet, have a safe system. For example, if you have a teenage daughter and she really wants to go out with her friends, great. Okay, teach her, have a code word, have something that she can text you if she feels in danger or in trouble. Have some kind of plan, some exit plan if she's going out and learning how to be independent. Okay, have some kind of system. And if something happens, or if there's a mistake, let them be free to speak to you as the adults without shame or without blame. Get to the heart of the matter, and then, correct the path. But college students, hey, let's go party, right? It's just beer, or it's just wine, or whatever it is. But I encourage young people, you need to watch. If you choose to drink, you need to watch that drink. Do not set it down. Do not let someone else carry it for you. You don't know what they'll put in there. And so it's not a judgment against having a drink. It's a cautionary tale. It's be wise, have a system if you feel you're in trouble or you might be uncomfortable with the situation, with a peer. So it's basic things that we can teach our young people. We teach them to say no to drugs. We teach them that if you want to protect things that are important, you put them in a storage unit, right? Or you put a fence around it. But we don't teach them how to protect themselves.
Yeah. And, that's good advice. I have a 16-year-old son myself, and, and so one of the things that I always look at is like, well, he's got good judgment, which he does. He has good people senses and all of that. But yeah, it's good to know how to talk to them, what kinds of things are some things to look out for, and to have those non-judgmental conversations, which was also part of what you're talking about with your Beulah's place.
Yes.
mhm.
Absolutely, because if they're afraid to talk to you,
Yeah.
they're more likely to get hurt or get into something that's irreversible. And one quick example of that, it wasn't one of our kids, but a different observer sent it to me. She said, a friend of mine had a daughter at 16. She was invited by a young boy, kind of like a first date type of thing, to go have a soda at a big box store. I think it was Target. And so they agreed, he agreed to pick her up in his car, which he did. They go to Target. But before he even gets into the doors with her, he says, I'm so not feeling well. I'm really sick. Don't think I can really do this, but let me call one of my friends and I'll have them take you home. How about that? So he texts or calls the friends, and she doesn't know what to do, right? She's not even sure mom knows she's really going out with this young boy. But it's afternoon. She's got her backpack, and mom smartly had sewn in a place for the girl's phone. Well, when the car showed up, there were 3 boys in it, and she was grabbed. They didn't take the time to look through her backpack. And so when she didn't come home, mom gets concerned, and she went to the police. They tracked the GPS or whatever it is in the girl's phone. There was enough battery left. But by the time they got her, she was already from California across state lines into Arizona. And she went home, not the same young, innocent girl she was when she left. Wow. But she was alive.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And the thing is that I never want to scare people because we have a lot of fear tactics. It's more about awareness and
Yes.
yeah, tools, what to look for, how to discern, and how to communicate, and that safety and non-judgmental piece. And for us as adults to put that part of us on the shelf and allow the safe space for our kids to talk is huge.
Absolutely, because even though they may be responsible and they may be, good kids and all of that, it's not about good, bad, responsible or not. They're still young.
Yeah.
They're still kids growing into young adults, but they don't have enough of that experience. And so, if let's say you have a 16-year-old and in our area, there are jobs that, the 15, 16-year-old range is, a little bit difficult just because of the age. So there are people that'll say, hey, come mow my grass, right? Or come clean my house. Or you offer kids any kind of summer job that you can. And we try and create work for the kids that we help if they're minors and they can't get a normal job like an 18-year-old could with a car. So we try and help. But we also are very careful about the ads, where it's coming from. We check it out? Are you sure this is legit? Or we teach them, here's how you check out. Here's how you trust and verify whether that person is safe or whether that's a real job or if it's just kind of something where they're trying to get teens to show up and then grab them. So it's very difficult, but you've got to do the work. And that's where the hope is. If we do the work, we rescued and housed over 42 kids before COVID. And we do still try and help them on the street in their cars, put them in motel rooms, whatever we can for housing right now. And we also helped about 200 minors. And so we try to get the word out that we can save our children from this heinous pandemic, this assault against their human rights. But we have to care about it first. And secondly, we have to be willing to be educated and be aware of it. And that's where the hope is. And if someone like me can make it, any of these kids can make it, but they don't know we're looking for them yet.
Yeah. And so what would be some things to look for with something like those jobs? What would be good questions and things to look for, whether it's legitimate?
Well, one of the things I tell people is, or some of the parents I've worked with is, first of all, have you talked to your child about, getting a job, what it means to have a job, and check out the phone number first, call, meet that person. And I know kids will be, I don't want my mom or my dad to go with me to a job interview, but really we're talking about mowing lawns or babysitting, whatever right now. So, have the adult vet out the phone number, the person, especially if that child does not know that person or the parent doesn't know that person. Do they live in town? Does anyone else in the community know that person? Stuff like that. The basic things that if you were a child, you would want to know, or rather, I'm sorry, if you were the parent, you would want to know for your own child, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before you let them just go over to someone's house without knowing who's in the house, or do they have guns? Do they have alcohol? What kind of situation is it? So I advise that the adult try to vet that out for the younger teens. And if the younger teen ends up going and meeting or says, hey, I'm going to go do this anyway, then at least either have the tracker on the phone or have a safe system set up, have some kind of code word. Hey, if you get there, Jane, and you don't feel comfortable, text me. No questions asked, just text me or whatever. So having those safeguards in place will not only make that teen or that young person feel safer and valued. They won't feel policed. They'll feel like, hey, mom or dad or whoever the guardian is all for me doing this, but they just want to make sure I'm going to be okay. Most kids will respond to that favorably. Not all kids, but most kids would if it's done the right way. But like you said, if we have judgment or threats or, different kinds of negativity attached to why you're doing that, it will not go over well. For the older kids, the college kids, same thing. Check it out. Have a couple of your friends check it out with you. Go together. Have 3 of you. Somebody that can call for help if something happens, or text. Be aware of your surroundings and find out, well, what kind of party is this? Who's in charge of it? Oh, it's just a college party. Well, find out more information before you just show up. Or if you show up, then again, use the safeguards. Carry your drink. Don't let anyone else have your drink. If you're not sure, put it down, get a fresh one or bring your own beverage, whatever it is. But you have to be aware, and especially for the ladies, it is so easy for a young man to overtake a young girl. And I don't think they realize that, because who doesn't want to feel like they're the belle of the ball, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
they
that's
have
the
a
thing
date,
is
they
that,
have a guy interested,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, even as adults, we make mistakes. Sometimes we're just not in a good space mentally. Maybe we're distracted, whatever. So adults make mistakes too, and we sometimes have poor judgment. So if a teenager is making those kinds of decisions, you can't really blame them, and it's just part of, like you said, of figuring life out. And sometimes even when you do have a loving parents, you might be in a space where you're feeling lonely anyway, and you know that, like you said, that sense of loneliness can get us into so much trouble.
Absolutely. And here's the other part of it. It's a tough deal. Being a parent is a huge responsibility. But let's say you're a parent and maybe you're divorced or you're single or whatever, and you're bringing over boyfriends or girlfriends. Who are you bringing over that your children are watching, or that your young teen or your college student will be watching? Because that's an example. You're modeling for them who you choose as well, and what you do with that person. So again, putting a little more thought into what our children's witness, what they hear from you, how they're hearing it, whether you think they're adult enough. I had one parent say, well, 14, she can take care of herself. 14, you can't drive, you can't vote, you can't get a job, really. Where is she going to go to take care of herself, right?
Right.
And so that's just abandonment and neglect, in my view, which is abuse. And so that's my personal opinion. But most of the time, if, let's just say, someone out there listening or watching maybe recognizes that some of their behavior is not healthy towards their kids, will call for help. We have national hotlines on both voicesagainsttrafficking.com and beulahsplace.org. And they're not just for victims, but for people that maybe need help, whether it's anger management, or maybe they've gone too far and they accidentally hit or shoved one of their children. Call the National Child Abuse Hotline that's listed. Call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. If you think someone's involved or they're a predator or a victim, possibly, have those numbers in your phone and in your kids' phones. So no matter where they are, they can reach out to a neutral, safe person who will find someone in their area safe to help them. That's the very least we can do.
Yeah.
And so again, the hotlines are one easy way to at least give your kids a tool.
Right, right. Yeah. And as a parent, sometimes it's very difficult and frustrating. And I love how you encourage people to recognize that that is also part of loving, to recognize that, oh my gosh, I went too far. I need to learn how to manage this.
Absolutely. We're all human, but when it's between an adult and a child, 18 or under, there is never an excuse for abuse. There is never an excuse to slap or hit or hurt or beat down a child, 18 or under. Never, ever. There's just no reason. And
Mhm.
so, because that adult is still legally responsible for what happens. Now, there are, people say, well, you don't understand. Well, I probably don't understand every situation, but, there are the cases, maybe there's something going on. And obviously, I have heard of some situations where, a teenager had a gun or a knife and tried to attack his or her parents. And, that's kind of on the extreme end. The general rule is that we need to protect each other and we need to respect each other. And we need to understand that, like you just said, if we're not quite sure uh, that we're stable enough, or, maybe we do have some anger issues, then get some help. Just make a call and let somebody help you before it gets out of control.
And that's the piece that I always talk about. Those things are usually our own unresolved issues that when we do the work to heal those, then we are going to be better at responding rather than reacting. There's a big difference there. So, how,
Absolutely. And please say something if you see something.
yeah. And what would be the last piece? We have 2 minutes left that you want to get across to people to wrap up.
First of all, if you have been victimized, it is not your fault. Okay. You are not alone. And there are ways that we can help you and that you can get help and lead a productive life. If you are a predator or you feel you're out of control, you definitely need to, again, let people help you get through this. But if you're a predator who chooses out of depraved nature or for any other reason, we have a human rights movement in place, and we will make sure that penalties are implemented and that you will get caught at some point, because at some point predators usually do get found out. It's just a matter of how far they go before they do. But if you have a conscience, then I encourage you to stop and stop now.
And usually, and this is not an excuse, usually something's happened in your life if you're a predator, and this is one of the ways that you're acting out. So, you
Yes.
know, yeah, yeah. So again, get help. Andy, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this. It's hugely important information. Call your legislators, ask them what their opinion is on how to deal with human trafficking and child abuse so that we can make some changes.
Absolutely. And ask them what they have done or what they are doing, because talk is cheap, but we want to know who are the ones that are doing something for the children of this country right now.
Yes, those are our future and they are our responsibility. We brought them into the world. So there it is. Once again, thank you so much, Andi Buerger, for the work that you do and for speaking up, speaking out, being a survivor, being a true beacon, and helping these kids.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an honor. And if any viewers have questions, they can always contact us through those websites, voicesagainsttrafficking.com and beulahsplace.org. So thank you, Karin. Really appreciate it.
And I will make sure that those links are underneath here, both on YouTube when I post it there and on Facebook, so that and everywhere we have this.
Excellent. Thank you again.
And that's a wrap. Awesome show, ladies.
All right. Thank you
Good.
so
Yay.
much.
All right,
Yes,
Karin.
thank you.
Absolutely.